Is Diet Coke actually better than Coke? What about honey versus Splenda? Most people think that natural sugars are healthier and artificial ones are toxic, but it's not so simple. And if you get this wrong, it could be sabotaging your weight, blood sugar levels, and even food cravings. I'm Michael Smith, a naturopathic doctor, and I like to break down the complex science and make it easier for people to understand so that you can make smarter decisions about your health. In today's video, I'm going to go through one of the best breakdowns on this topic I've seen. And this is from Peter Attia's most recent AMA on different sweeteners and sugars. And I highly recommend subscribing to the Drive podcast if you want to get into the really super detailed, complex science. But here we'll break down the key takeaways that are most important for you to know. So by the end of this video, you'll know why we're hardwired to eat sugar, when sugar is actually fine and when it's most harmful, the real risks and benefits of artificial and natural sweeteners, and which ones are the best in specific situations, and also a simple hierarchy of the worst to the best choices that you can make, so you'll know exactly what to put in your coffee, protein shake, or even if you're having a sweet treat. First, why do we love sugar so much? From an evolutionary point of view, it helps to keep us alive. For 250,000 years, starvation was a bigger problem than obesity. Sweet flavors, they were meant to keep us safe, they were calorie rich, and the bitter flavors were more associated with bad food or poison. The problem is our genetics haven't been updated, and the modern food environment, we're surrounded by constant sugar access, candy, protein bars, sweetened foods, and our biology is pushing us to crave these foods. So if you feel guilty about eating sweets and you have a sweet tooth, don't. It's not a weakness. Your hardwired biology is driving you towards eating more sugar. Here's the controversial question. Is sugar uniquely fattening? If you look at the controlled studies where two groups eat the exact same number of calories, sugar by itself doesn't lead to more fattening than other foods like proteins, fats, and other carbs. But in real life, we don't live in a metabolic chamber. In the real world, sugar has unique ability to increase appetite, drop your blood sugar, and spike it after eating. And this helps to light up the brain's reward center so we crave more food. And that's why you can polish off a whole packet of candies or a bag of cookies even when you're not hungry, because we're hardwired to eat them and our brain doesn't make us feel full afterwards. And not all sugars act the same. Fructose in large amounts is worse than glucose because it depletes energy in cells and it doesn't trigger the same satiety hormones. That's one reason why fruit with its fiber and water behaves differently than high fructose corn syrup in sodas or when you drink fruit juice. There's a big difference between liquid and solid sugar, and the absorption rate matters. So if liquid sugars like orange juice or Coca-Cola, you get a high concentration of sugar and no fiber, and it's faster absorbed in the gut, and this accelerates the metabolic effects, and it makes it a lot more easier to consume a lot more sugar from a fruit juice than eating 6 apples, for example, compared to one glass of orange juice. And when you eat foods that are solid with sugar in, the absorption is slowed down due to the presence of fiber or fats or protein. This reduces that rapid glucose response, so you tend to still overeat the foods, but not as bad as the liquids. And you also get more calories from fats and things in some of these sweet treats. And also real food versus ultra-processed foods. Real foods have more fiber, water, and that helps to slow down the sugar absorption. You feel fuller, and it doesn't stimulate the appetite as much as processed foods. So that's where you're much better off if you're going to have a sweet treat, having a homemade cake made with eggs and flour versus an ultra-processed refined foods made with lots of artificial colorings and flavorings that make them addictive. Timing also plays a huge role in how sugar affects you. The best time to have sugar is right after exercise when your muscles are primed to soak up glucose and your glycogen stores are depleted. That's why endurance athletes can take in large amounts of sugar during an event without any negative metabolic effects. But if you're trying to lose weight, that does not mean that you can exercise then eat a bunch of high sugar foods and still expect to lose weight. Watch this video on metabolism if you want more information on that. And the worst time to eat sugar is late at night, especially before bed when insulin sensitivity is at its lowest. If you've ever worn a continuous glucose monitor or track your blood glucose levels, you'll see a much bigger spike in glucose at night compared to the same meal in the morning. So sugar isn't automatically good or bad. It depends on when, how much, and in what form you intake the sugar. Another big misconception is that natural sugars like honey or maple syrup are healthier. And the reality is that at the biochemical level, there's still glucose and fructose. Honey or agave may actually have higher amounts of fructose than table sugar, even if honey has a few micronutrients or antioxidants, but it's not enough to cancel out the metabolic downsides. The only difference is that when sugar is packaged in whole food, like fruit, the fiber slows down the absorption, you get more vitamins, phytonutrients, along with the sweetness. So with a candy bar, you just get the natural sugar, but without the goodness. So watch out for candy bars that are sweetened with natural sugars. They're no healthier than just simple sugar. So let's talk about artificial sweeteners. The three most common are aspartame with brand names like NutraSweet and Equal, sucralose, which are brand names like Splenda, and these are often found in protein powders and shakes. And then you've got saccharin, which is the old school one like Sweet and Low. They're hundreds of times sweeter than sugar with virtually no calories. Now, if you look at this chart here, you will see that saccharin is 300 times sweeter than sugar, aspartame is 180 to 200 times sweeter, and sucralose is 600 times sweeter. So you don't need to use very much of these types of sweeteners. The big scare has always been cancer. But here's the truth. At real-world dosages, there's no credible evidence that they cause cancer. The World Health Organization recently labeled aspartame as a possible carcinogen. That was based on a flawed rat study where they were drinking the equivalent of 20 cans of diet soda a day. And in real life, most people do not do that. So in low amounts, they are safe to take, but they don't provide the satiety so people can still tend to overeat in other areas. So these artificial sweeteners safe? Yes, at normal intake, but they don't provide the same satiety, so people still tend to overeat in other areas. Plus, they can tend to alter the gut microbiome, which can have other negative effects too. And for many people, they can actually drive compensatory eating. So you might save a few calories from Diet Coke, but then eat more elsewhere, because you've still got that craving for sweet foods. Now let's move on to the better alternatives like stevia and monk fruit. They're natural low-calorie sweeteners. They have a neutral or slightly positive effect on glucose and weight compared to normal sugar. The next lot is the sugar alcohols like erythritol, xylitol, and sorbitol. And they're lower calorie because they're not fully absorbed by the body. Erythritol is usually the gentlest on the digestion. Xylitol, which is found in a lot of toothpaste and gums and has unique dental benefits, but many people don't tolerate it, especially if you've got gut issues. And sorbitol is cheap and it's commonly found in sugar-free candies, but it can cause bloating, diarrhea, and especially if you've got IBS symptoms, you really want to avoid these sugar alcohols. Now, the real standout sweetener is allulose, but it's not easy to get in some countries. It's about as 70% as sweet as sugar with almost 0 calories, and it triggers the same satiety pathways as real sugar, and it even competes for glucose absorption in the gut and the kidneys. This can actually give you a better blood glucose response. And every study so far shows that it has a positive effect on weight and glycemic control, even compared to water or stevia. The only downside is it's tricky to use in commercial products that can change the texture and the color of foods over time, so that makes it harder to use in most packaged products. But for home use, like making coffee or baking, it's a really good substitute. So let's put all this together into a hierarchy from worst to best. So the worst is sugary sodas, juices, and processed candy. Avoid them or have them rarely. Slightly better is diet sodas with aspartame, sucralose, and a better option would be using stevia, monk fruit, or xylitol or erythritol, if you can tolerate them. The best substitute for sugar is allulose, and the gold standard is just eating whole fruit and retraining your palate to enjoy that overall sweetness, and you get the advantage of polyphenols, vitamins, and minerals. Think of it as like a nicotine allergy. Cigarettes are the worst, vaping might be slightly better, and having nicotine patches is better still. But overall, avoiding nicotine is the best. And the equivalent of sugar is Coke is the worst, Diet Coke is better, and sparkling water or fruit is the best. So what are the key action steps? Well, if you're drinking 3 regular Cokes a day, switching to 1 Diet Coke is a definite win. But the ultimate goal should be moving towards sparkling water or whole fruit. For protein powders and bars with a small amount of sucralose or stevia, it's worth it if it helps you get your protein levels. But relying on artificially sweetened desserts to satisfy your cravings is going to be a negative overall because they don't satisfy a satiety and you end up chasing sweetness somewhere else and overall eating more calories. The best strategies is to use sweeteners as stepping stones to a healthier diet or for occasional treats, not a permanent crutch that you have every day. Also checking your metabolic markers like glucose, HbA1c, and your insulin levels, as this can influence how much sugar that you can actually tolerate. Check the description for how you can order these detailed types of tests. And let me know in the comments what sweetener you use. Do you use sugar, stevia, or go for one of the artificial sweeteners? And once again, thanks to Peter Attia and the Drive podcast for his super detailed breakdown of this sugar and sweetener topic.